The basketball world felt a collective jolt when Caitlin Clark, one of the brightest stars in women's college basketball, made a decision that shocked both fans and professionals alike. She left the WNBA before even entering it. It was a move that few saw coming, especially after a college career that had electrified audiences, broken records, and drawn countless comparisons to legends of the sport. But here we are, with the WNBA left reeling, and Clark herself standing by her choice, leaving many to wonder how one player could so deeply rattle an entire league. But before we proceed further, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe. Caitlin Clark had been a sensation long before the WNBA had even come into the picture. Her time at the University of Iowa was nothing short of legendary. Clark was a walking highlight reel, with her deep three-pointers, her court vision, and her ability to command a game like few players could. The media loved her, the fans adored her, and her opponents feared her. She was, quite frankly, seen as the future of women's basketball. And while many expected her to transition seamlessly into the professional game, something changed along the way. It wasn't as though the WNBA didn't want her. On the contrary, they were preparing to roll out the red carpet. The league had been banking on Clark's star power to help grow its audience, boost ticket sales, and generate more media coverage. The WNBA, while filled with incredible talent, has long struggled to gain the same level of attention and viewership as its male counterpart, the NBA. And Clark, with her style of play and magnetic personality, was supposed to be the key to drawing more eyes to the sport. But then, just when it seemed like the stars were aligning for her WNBA debut, Clark threw a curveball. She made it clear, in her own fashion, that the league was not where she wanted to be. Whether it was a dissatisfaction with the WNBA's structure, the pay scale, or something more personal, Clark decided to go in a completely different direction. And just like that, the WNBA found itself scrambling. The reaction from the league was immediate, and it wasn't pretty. While there wasn't a public outcry from league officials, you could practically feel the tension in the air. This wasn't just any player deciding to pass on the WNBA. This was the player. The one that everyone had been talking about for months. The one that was going to be the face of the league for years to come. To say the WNBA threw a fit might be putting it lightly. It was more like a slow, quiet implosion, with league executives likely pacing their offices, trying to figure out how things went so sideways. From the outside looking in, it seemed like a classic case of missed opportunities and mismatched expectations. Clark had, in her own way, outgrown the narrative that had been written for her. She wasn't just a basketball player. She was a brand, a persona that was larger than the sport itself. And while the WNBA may have offered her a chance to play on the biggest stage in women's basketball, it didn't necessarily offer the kind of platform that Clark was looking for. What made this even more frustrating for the league was the fact that Clark's departure was as much about the structure of the WNBA as it was about her personal ambitions. The league, despite its growth, still struggles with issues like salary caps, limited media coverage, and a lack of financial incentives that could make staying in the U.S. more appealing to players. Overseas, many women's basketball players can earn significantly more, and Clark's decision shined a spotlight on these discrepancies. But let's not make this all about dollars and cents. Sure, money talks, but Clark's decision seemed to go deeper than just financial reasons. She had always been a player who did things on her terms, from her shot selection to her fiery on-court persona. Her decision to bypass the WNBA might have been driven by a need to explore other opportunities that better aligned with her vision of herself. Whether that was in media, branding, or even overseas basketball remains to be seen, but the message was clear. She wasn't going to be boxed into any expectations. For the WNBA, this was a bitter pill to swallow. The league, which has been on the cusp of a major breakthrough in recent years, needed a player like Clark to help push it over the edge. The league has been gaining momentum, with television ratings improving and more sponsorships coming in. But it's still an uphill battle. Having Clark, with her ability to draw attention from both hardcore basketball fans and casual viewers, would have been a huge asset. Her exit leaves a gap that won't be easily filled, and the WNBA knows it. That said, it's not as if the WNBA is without talent. Far from it. The league is stacked with incredible players, many of whom have had storied careers, and continue to dominate on the court. But there's something about a player like Clark, someone who transcends the sport and captures the imagination of a broader audience, that is irreplaceable. Players like that come along once in a generation, and the WNBA was banking on Clark to be their next big draw. It's important to note that Clark's departure doesn't spell doom for the league. The WNBA is resilient and has weathered challenges before. However, it does force the league to take a long, hard look at itself and its future. Clark's decision highlighted some of the underlying issues that have plagued the WNBA for years, issues that many in the basketball community have been discussing for a long time. The league has made strides, but if it wants to keep its top talent and attract future stars, it's going to need to address these concerns more aggressively. The way the WNBA handled the situation was telling. Instead of going on a full-blown public relations offensive, the league chose to stay relatively quiet, likely hoping the situation would blow over. But the murmurs from behind the scenes couldn't be silenced. It was clear that the league had been caught off guard, and the loss of Clark, even before she had officially entered, was a blow that would sting for some time. The WNBA, like any professional sports league, is a business, and business was not going according to plan. From Caitlin Clark's perspective, the decision to leave the WNBA behind was just another step in her journey. She had already proven herself as one of the best players in the world, and perhaps she felt that the WNBA, at least in its current form, wasn't the right place for her. It's not easy to walk away from a sure thing, especially when that thing is the professional league you've been groomed for. But Clark has always been a player who follows her instincts, and this time, her instincts told her to chart a different course. Of course, her decision left many fans disappointed. There were countless young girls, and boys for that matter, who had looked up to Clark as a role model, as someone who had shown that hard work, talent, and a bit of swagger could take you to the top. Her absence from the WNBA meant that those fans wouldn't get to see her compete against the best of the best, at least not in the US, and that stung, not just for the fans, but for the league as well. But if there's one thing to learn from this whole saga, it's that Caitlin Clark isn't your typical player. She's not content to follow the path laid out for her, and she's not afraid to make decisions that others might shy away from. In a way, her decision to walk away from the WNBA, at least for now, was as bold as her on-court moves. It was a statement that said, loud and clear, that she wasn't going to be confined by anyone else's expectations. The fallout from Clark's decision will likely be felt for years to come. The WNBA, already in the process of reevaluating how it attracts and retains its players, will have to work even harder to avoid losing future stars to other opportunities. It's not just about money. It's about creating an environment that players like Clark feel excited to be a part of, one that offers them the platform and opportunities they deserve. With Caitlin Clark's unexpected departure from the WNBA, the implications are vast, extending far beyond the basketball court. Her decision to leave the league has sent ripples through the basketball community, challenging the WNBA's long-standing structure and exposing the cracks in the system that may have been easy to overlook when things seemed on track. Now, in light of this jarring event, the WNBA faces more than just the absence of one star player. It confronts the deeper issues that could shape its future for years to come. The first major implication of Clark's decision is the question it raises about player satisfaction and the WNBA's ability to retain its top talent. Clark's move isn't an isolated incident. Over the years, other prominent players have left the WNBA to seek better opportunities, most commonly overseas. These athletes often cite higher salaries, better benefits, and more exposure on the international stage as reasons for their departure. The fact that the league continues to struggle with retaining its brightest stars signals that the issue runs deeper than money or contracts. It's also about how the league supports, promotes, and respects its athletes. For years, the WNBA has battled for legitimacy and equal recognition alongside the NBA. It's no secret that the financial gap between the two leagues is enormous, with NBA players commanding multi-million-dollar salaries, while many WNBA players still earn a fraction of that. This financial disparity is not lost on players, and the frustrations over the league's wage scale have only grown louder. Caitlin Clark's exit highlights that the WNBA has yet to crack the code for keeping star players happy enough to commit fully to the league. The loss of someone as impactful as Clark is a clear signal to WNBA leadership that the league's current approach may need rethinking. But financial dissatisfaction, though significant, isn't the whole story. What Clark's departure really drives home is the issue of visibility. For all the WNBA's strides in the last few years, it still exists in the shadow of the NBA. Television deals, marketing efforts, and social media promotion are areas where the league could do better. The fact is, players like Caitlin Clark thrive in environments where they're at the center of attention. While the NBA is a global sensation with extensive media coverage, the WNBA often struggles to capture mainstream attention in the same way. For players who know they have the potential to be global icons, This discrepancy in exposure can be a huge factor in choosing where to take their talents. International leagues have capitalized on this gap. In places like Europe and Asia, women's basketball enjoys much more visibility, and top players like Breanna Stewart, Liz Cambage, and Diana Taurasi have all spent time playing overseas to not only earn a higher paycheck, but also to experience being the center of the basketball universe, even if only for a season or two. Caitlin Clark, with her magnetic personality and star power, could easily dominate overseas markets, where women's basketball is sometimes seen as more prestigious than in the United States. For someone like Clark, the opportunity to be a major player in the international game, both in terms of finances and fame, might simply be too tempting to pass up. The WNBA is being forced to compete with global markets that are more attractive to players who feel they have earned more than what the league currently offers. Beyond the issues of pay and visibility, Clark's decision to leave the WNBA raises questions about the overall culture of the league. The WNBA has come a long way since its inception, but it still struggles with its identity. Unlike the NBA, which has long been seen as both a basketball league and a lifestyle brand, the WNBA hasn't fully tapped into the cultural space that many players, especially younger stars like Clark, want to inhabit. It's not just about what happens on the court anymore. Players want to be part of a broader cultural movement. They want to influence fashion, music, politics, and more. Clark, whose swagger and confidence are central to her brand, may have felt that the WNBA wasn't positioned to offer her the kind of cultural relevance she was seeking. The NBA has mastered this balance, blending the worlds of sports and entertainment so seamlessly that their players become icons off the court as much as they are on it. While the WNBA has made progress in this area, the league still has a long way to go in terms of positioning its players as cultural ambassadors. For a player like Clark, who clearly has an interest in branding herself beyond basketball, the WNBA may have seemed like a limiting environment rather than a springboard to greater opportunities. The conversation about player empowerment also ties into this. In recent years, professional athletes across all sports have begun to exercise more control over their careers. From free agency decisions to media ventures, players are increasingly taking charge of their narratives. Caitlin Clark's decision is another example of this trend. She made a bold move by walking away from what many saw as the next logical step in her career. But for Clark, this wasn't about logic. It was about choosing her path on her terms, in a way that made the most sense for her future. Clark's departure has forced the WNBA to reckon with its place in the larger landscape of women's sports and to consider what it can offer that international leagues and other opportunities cannot. As it stands, many of the league's top players end up supplementing their careers with stints overseas, where they can earn more money and enjoy higher status. This isn't sustainable for the WNBA if it wants to keep building its brand and retaining talent. Clark's exit, dramatic as it was, has brought these challenges to the forefront in a way that the league can't ignore any longer. The WNBA has always had to fight for its place in the sports world, and that fight just got a little tougher. With Clark gone, the league loses more than just a player. It loses a symbol of what the future could have been. Players like Clark are rare. They don't come around often, and when they do, leagues must do everything they can to keep them. But the WNBA wasn't able to hold on to Clark, and now the league has to find new ways to adapt to the changing demands of its players and fans alike. Of course, the impact of Clark's departure will be felt by the fans as well. Her decision leaves a void, not just for the league, but for the fans who were eager to see her light up the NBA courts the same way she did in college. Clark had amassed a massive following during her time at Iowa, with her flair for the dramatic and her fearless playing style drawing in viewers who might not have been regular followers of women's basketball. These fans were ready to carry their support into the WNBA, eager to watch Clark take on the best in the league. Now, those same fans are left in limbo, unsure of where they'll next see their favorite player in action. This uncertainty affects the WNBA's broader efforts to grow its fanbase. Clark wasn't just any player. She had the potential to bring in new fans who might not have been following the league previously. Her ability to attract attention with her style of play was unmatched, and her decision to step away means the WNBA loses that crucial connection to a broader audience. The league has been working hard to grow its viewership and attract more sponsorship deals, and the presence of a star like Clark could have accelerated that growth. Without her, those plans may face a setback, forcing the league to rethink how it markets itself to a wider audience. Another consequence of Clark's departure is the precedent it sets for other young stars who are considering their next moves. The WNBA has long been seen as the pinnacle of women's basketball, the ultimate goal for any player coming out of college. But Clark's decision to walk away challenges that narrative. If someone as high-profile as Clark can choose to bypass the WNBA, what does that say to other young players? Will they begin to question whether the WNBA is the best option for them too? The league has always prided itself on being the top destination for the best women's basketball players in the world. But Clark's exit forces it to confront the reality that it may no longer hold that status for everyone. This shift in perception could have significant long-term effects on the WNBA's talent pool. If more players start to view the league as just one of many options, rather than the ultimate goal, the WNBA could find itself in competition with other leagues and opportunities in ways it hasn't had to deal with before. While the league has always faced some level of competition from overseas, the possibility that top American players could begin exploring alternative paths outside of the WNBA is a new and unsettling development. For the WNBA to address these concerns, it will have to make some difficult choices about its future. The league has already made progress in areas like player salaries, with the new collective bargaining agreement offering increased pay and benefits for players. But Clark's departure shows that these changes may not be enough. The league will need to continue evolving if it wants to remain competitive in the increasingly crowded landscape of professional women's sports. This could mean revisiting its salary structure, expanding marketing efforts, or even partnering more closely with international leagues to offer players the best of both worlds. Caitlin Clark's decision to leave the WNBA also brings up larger questions about the future of women's sports in general. As women's sports continue to grow in popularity and visibility, the WNBA finds itself at a crossroads. On one hand, it has the opportunity to be at the forefront of this movement, leading the charge for greater recognition and equality for female athletes. On the other hand, if it fails to adapt to the changing landscape, it risks falling behind as other opportunities emerge for players who want more than what the league currently offers. Caitlin Clark's decision to leave the WNBA marks a crucial turning point not only for the league but for professional women's basketball as a whole. It shines a spotlight on the evolving expectations of athletes today, who now see themselves as more than just players, but as individuals with the power to shape their own careers. This shift in mentality, where players actively seek out the best opportunities for themselves in terms of both their professional and personal growth, is reshaping the entire sports landscape. The WNBA, in particular, faces a unique challenge in keeping pace with these changes if it wants to retain top-tier talent and maintain its position as the premier women's basketball league. One important implication of Clark's move is the way it forces the WNBA to reconsider its overall business model. In a world where athletes are becoming increasingly brand-conscious, the league has to provide not only a competitive environment, but also one that fosters long-term personal and professional growth for its players. This might mean expanding its media reach, embracing more creative forms of player promotion, and providing athletes with additional resources that support off-the-court endeavors. Players like Clark are interested in being more than just athletes. They are keen on becoming cultural icons. To remain relevant, the WNBA must find ways to help its players cultivate their personal brands while ensuring that they feel valued and supported. Clark's departure also hints at another emerging trend: the diversification of professional opportunities available to women athletes. Historically, the WNBA was seen as the pinnacle of women's basketball in the U.S., but now, with the rise of international leagues offering more lucrative contracts and higher levels of exposure, that perception is changing. For the WNBA, this means that its monopoly on top-tier talent is no longer guaranteed. To compete, the league must find ways to enhance its appeal, perhaps by offering more flexible contracts or exploring new partnerships with international organizations. It is becoming increasingly clear that players want options, and leagues that fail to offer them could be left behind. Another key factor the WNBA must contend with is the rising power of player autonomy. As athletes like Clark take greater control over their careers, it's clear that leagues must adapt to this new player-driven paradigm. No longer are players content to follow a preordained path. Instead, they are carving out new routes that prioritize their individual needs, interests, and long-term goals. This means that leagues, WNBA included, will need to be more responsive to players' desires, whether it's through contract flexibility, endorsement opportunities, or other incentives that reflect the modern athlete's priorities. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more engaging content. We thrive on your feedback, so be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Until next time, Keep discovering and stay tuned.